Hello, this episode is split into two parts, so if you're not wanting to hear about abuse, trauma and sadness, you can just skip ahead and listen to part 2, where I talk about how I survived and learnt to thrive and move forward in my life. I'm going to set the tone for my future episodes and give you a very quick outline of the events of my life that have happened to me, or as I like to say, for me, that have shaped who I've become today. I wear my heart on my sleeve. The secrets I will be telling you throughout this and future episodes are my side of events, and I'm not here to name and shame anyone. But this is my story, and this is my truth. Welcome to the Secrets in the Powder Room, where we share stories and open up conversations about all the secrets women are forced to keep out of fear and shame. I'm Louise Bryant, professional certified coach, intuitive eating counsellor, and trauma-informed domestic abuse specialist and survivor. I'm here to support you on your healing journey and help you feel like you're not alone. This is not to be a replacement of your own professional, medical or legal advice. This podcast contains adult language and content. Listener discretion is advised. Do you want to hear some secrets? I'm going to tell you about some tragic and disturbing events that happened throughout my life, and also some positive ways that I've overcome them. But I want to start by saying that I've had a really good life. I had a fantastic childhood, amazing parents, and lots of amazing people in my life. I also want to add that my mum is the most amazing woman I know, and without her support throughout my life, I really don't know where I'd be right now. I've always joked and said you could write a book about my life, but after writing all this out, I've decided that one day in the not so distant future, I will definitely write a book. I was born in 1979 in South East London, so that would explain my accent, and occasionally I might slip into full-blown South East London, but I will try and speak as best English as possible. So I want to start at the age of 2. I had eye surgery because I have a piece of my eyeball missing and I'm practically blind in one eye. At the age of 3, I started gymnastics, and that went on for some years. I'm not sure what age it was, but it was definitely before I was 8, and I can remember it so vividly. There was sexual abuse from a much older boy who was very close to me at the time. At the age of 8, my nan, who I was really, really close to, had a severe stroke affecting the right side of her body, and this affected her speech, and all she could say was 2 shoes and very nice. And it also affected her right arm and her right leg. And this was the age that I also have my earliest memories of body image issues and thinking I was fat around gymnastics. Now, when I was 12, my granddad died, and at that point I became a carer for my nan, and I gave up gymnastics and started trampolining and helped coach the little ones. And I used to go to school. After school every day I'd go to my nan's house and help her in from her day centre and help her get changed and help her go to the toilet, help her get washed, make her food, put her to bed. At the age of 14, I got into a young relationship that was quite aggressive and violent, and I always thought it was like a brother-sister sort of relationship because I had quite a fighty relationship with my younger of my 2 brothers. That was also when I started starving myself and using laxatives. At the age of 15, I had an accident on a trampoline, severely spraining my back and neck, and was taken to hospital in a stretcher. And they thought I'd broken my back. But straight after that, I left school, and I was 15 years old and left school, and I started working as a trainee hairdresser. At the age of 16, the boy I was seeing got into a fight with some boys, and they broke into the flat that he was living in when I was there, and he got badly beaten up and I got quite beaten up. There was a dog there, about 7 or 8 guys. They took my jewellery, they took my wages from work, which wasn't very much because I was a trainee hairdresser. And then we moved up north, but not for long. I stayed up there for a little while, really missed my family, and they come and rescued me. So at the age of 17, I got my driving licence, and I had my own room in a shared house. And again, that was quite a party lifestyle. And I got broken into a few times in my room, which wasn't very pleasant. But I'd also, by the time I was 18, I had a little studio flat. I was a qualified hairdresser, and I was driving around in my car, so I was very happy. And at that sort of time, I broke up with the relationship that was quite sort of aggressive, and I got with somebody else. But that's when my anorexia and bulimia started to get really bad. So when I was 19, the salon that I worked in closed down and I became a mobile hairdresser. Soon after that, a teenage boy broke into my flat and severely sexually assaulted me while I was sleeping. And soon after that, found out that my boyfriend had a baby behind my back with his ex-girlfriend. So I moved into a new flat on a really rough council estate, and I was suffering really badly at this point with PTSD and depression and anorexia. My periods had stopped, and I was told by a male doctor that I couldn't have children, and he internally examined me in a really inappropriate way. When I was 20, New Year 2000, my parents broke up and my dad left my mum for her sister. And I didn't speak to my dad for about 3 years after that. And all of my security had gone now. My partner, my flat, my dignity, my job. And we went for a really traumatic court case. And while I was going through all this, I put my left hand through a window while slamming it shut while I was really angry and frustrated with my life. And then I had to have 15 stitches in that. And later on had some problems with that hand. So I had some counselling at this time, but my counsellor could never remember what we'd spoke about last time, and I was just going over the same stuff, so that didn't actually work out for me at that point. I then worked in an estate agent, but left because my boss was coming on to me and trying to have sex with me all the time. So from age 20 to about 2022 was the most destructive time of my life. I went to Greece to see my friend and I got asked to leave because I was just a bit traumatised and a bit all over the place and disrupting their lifestyle. And then I went to stay with my ex-boyfriend and his new wife, and a friend of a friend there raped me while I was sleeping. And I worked in a few nightclubs, I danced in clubs and bars, and I worked on the party bus. And the disruption in my life continued until I met a boy who tamed me. And we fell pregnant really quickly, and I nearly had the baby terminated, but I decided to keep it. And a few months later, when I was 6 months pregnant, the baby was stillborn. And that's when the violence started and the abuse really started in that relationship. We tried some bereavement counselling. We also tried some couples counselling. But I was so depressed at that time that I just wanted to replace the loss that I felt. So I fell pregnant again. But it was around this time that I started talking to my dad again after 3 years. And we had a funeral for that baby. And then when I was 24, I had my eldest child, my son, and my beloved grandmother died. And I moved from the rough estate that I lived in into a lovely flat near my family and my son's family. I also worked in a hair salon for a little bit of that time as well. That lasted maybe a couple of years. But then sadly, when I was 26, my dad died suddenly of a heart attack at the age 57. And the abusive relationship that I was in at that point was very on and off. You know, it'd kick off, then I'd go back, I'd kick off, I'd go back. As we do when we're in these kind of relationships. Some of you may can relate to that. At the age of 30, I had some psychotherapy and it was brilliant. She got me involved in a program that's designed for women survivors of domestic abuse and how to recognise red flags and green flags. And I met a man and he ticked all the red flags. And if I hadn't done that course, I don't think I would have been so vigilant and noticed these flags so soon. And when I broke up with him, I was training for a half marathon and he was stalking me. He was, following me on a motorbike while I was training. And I ended up having to get the police to put a restraining order on him. When I was 31, I did a bit of adult gymnastics, and then I met my now husband, and I also had 6 months worth of intense therapy. On my 32nd birthday, I got engaged and then moved in with my now husband. When I was 33, I had a court case with my eldest son's father, which was quite hard and traumatic. And then at 34, I got married, woohoo, and had the most romantic wedding ever, in my opinion. But we went on honeymoon, and it was in Mexico. And this one night, I was just so silly. So I got quite drunk. It was quite late because our body clocks had not adjusted. So it was like the equivalent of about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we was watching a show, and I stupidly ran off from my husband. And then in the taxi on my own back to the hotel, the man in the cab tried to sexually assault me, and he pulled over off of the highway into some woods. But as he was doing this, I jumped out of the car, ran across the highway and flagged down a tourist coach for help. And I felt so stupid about putting myself in danger like that. And I never really told anybody about that. So that's one of my other big secrets that not a lot of people know. So later that year, when I was 34, I got pregnant and I had a daughter. At age 35, on my daughter's first birthday, my eldest brother died of a heart attack also at the age of 42. And then soon after that, I fell pregnant with my second son. And he was born on the same day as my stillborn baby. At the age of 37, I had some hand surgery to rectify something called Dupuytren's contracture in my left hand. My left hand was closing in, and I have lumps in my left hand as well that were quite painful. And this was a trauma response, or what they reckon was a trauma response from when I put my hand through the window when I was 20. And then not long after that, I put my thumb through a coffee cafetiere, and a glass coffee cafetiere, and chopped my thumb right the way through to the bone. And I had to give up my job as a hairdresser, obviously. And this injury, I had to have surgery to fix the tendon, and then another lot of surgery because the tendon broke. And I had to have reconstruction, 2 reconstruction surgeries, and then another lot of surgery. And this has given me chronic pain ever since and limited use. And I will have to have more surgery this year. But this has also made me develop Dupuytren's in the palm of my hand. So the surgeon reckons both of my hands will be closing in at some point. That's something great to look forward to. And while this happened, obviously, because I had to give up my job as a hairdresser, my career as a hairdresser. So around that time, I developed depression and I was drinking a lot. The drink was helping with my pain as well. So not only was I drinking because I was depressed, I was also drinking to numb my pain of my hand. So I had some counselling, and then I also had some coaching, and it was through the coaching that I decided to become a coach. So I started my coach training when I was 38. At this point as well, I lost a few friendships, being told I've changed, and I've worked so bloody hard to change. So I actually saw this as a compliment, so it happens, doesn't it? We grow apart with some of our friends. Some people can't be our friends forever, and we all go in different ways as we grow up, and that's okay. And I wish all of them well, but we're just in different places now, and that's okay. At the age of 39, I gave up drinking alcohol. So in early 2020, I had another lot of hand surgery, and soon after we went into lockdown. And at first, like many of us, it took a while for us to adjust, or me to adjust to the new norm of homeschooling and trying to keep them from feeling scared. My husband was working. He was a firefighter at the time, so he was still working full time, and I was at home a lot on my own with the children, and obviously checking in with my family, making sure my mum was okay. So this made me feel really grateful that I've got a good man in my life, because at this point I knew that there would be a lot of women and men, I know, but obviously I feel for the women because I am one. But I was thinking about myself, and if I was in that past relationship in lockdown, what that would have been like, especially when my son was the way that he was at that time. And it was making me feel very, very grateful that I wasn't there, but it also made me think of all the women that were in them positions. And I just knew that obviously that would create even more domestic abuse going on in the homes. But I know now, because of all the work that I do, that there's a lot of women whose domestic abuse really started in lockdown, or they think they feel like it started in lockdown, but it just made it, magnified it. And, being stuck at home, maybe men losing their jobs, all the stress of it all. And yeah. So I got in touch with a few local domestic abuse charities, and I offered my coaching services for free. And I started coaching a few women one-to-one who are out of their abusive relationships, so that I couldn't help anyone who was in an abusive relationship because it might not have been safe for them, but it was my way of kind of giving something and trying to help. And I'm so glad I wasn't drinking alcohol when it was locked down, because I'm sure I would have used that as a coping mechanism. And instead I used to say to my husband sometimes in the evening, I need to go and meditate, and that was like my glass of wine. In 2021 I moved house, and my PTSD from when the boy broke into my flat and sexually assaulted me came back quite badly. I moved twice, and the first time it calmed down, and then it came back the second time I moved, and I had some rewind technique on that, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the second part of this podcast. I did have to record this podcast a few times. I have missed out a massive part of my life that doesn't just involve me, it involves my son. So due to the fact that it's not just my secret to be had, I've decided to not talk about that. I will talk about in detail how domestic abuse affects children, but I won't be using my personal stories on this podcast. So I just wanted to make that clear, that out of respect for my son, I won't be talking about his secrets. So throughout my life, I've also had ongoing body image issues. I've yo-yo dieted and tried every diet under the sun. I've had disordered eating and also dyslexia. I discovered later on that I have dyslexia. So I have an inner voice that tells me that I'm stupid, and why bother to put yourself out there, and why bother to do the podcast because no one's going to listen to it, or no one's going to like it, and your story's so boring. So to put this podcast out there, I know that it's actually going to help a lot of people, and hopefully help a lot of people feel like they're not alone. And I feel like it would be a disservice to not put this podcast out there. So I need to get over myself and just do it. Thank you for joining me, Louise Bryant, in this episode of The Secrets in the Powder Room. Make sure you listen to part 2, where I talk about all the things I did to heal from my traumas and how I help others to do the same. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode.